The idea of body types or somatotypes came about in the 1940s when American psychologist William Herbert Sheldon constructed a new version of somatotypology, the scientific study of the human body. His theory looked at a person's bodily ratios and body composition to place them into one of three categories. He then attempted to correlate these different personality dimensions to the different three somas: ectomorphology, mesomorphology, and endomorphologies. Because of the speculative nature of this personality dimension, his somas fell out of favor, but they were later revived by two of his successors, but without the personality aspect that Sheldon used. Somatotyping, while of course being put to use in a different way today compared to what it was originally created for, arguably gives us reliable dimensions for human appendages. From there we can ascertain what a given individual would excel at in regards to sporting events, assuming that we're comparing participants by equal mental capacity and ability. The somatotyping system is pretty straightforward. You have three values, for example 117, where the first refers to endomorphy, the second refers to mesomorphy, and the third refers to ectomorphy. A full ectomorph in this rating system appears as a 711, a mesomorph as a 171, and an endomorph as a 117. However, few people are at the extreme end of each soma, and most people have a combination of 2 or even 3 of all the somas. The anthropometric measurements used for calculating the three components tend to be your stature, as in your height, your body mass, and the foreskin fold measurements, which are the triceps, the subscapular, the supraspinal, and the medial calf, and then gives a range of other measurements such as the humerus or the femur breadth, the biceps and calf girth. So in simple terms, it's just taking a bunch of bodily measurements and then trying to categorize you into one of the three somatotypes or a combination of all three. Let's break this down by looking at the three body types. Ectomorphs are characterized as linear, thin, usually tall, fragile, light-muscled, flat-chested, and delicate with lower levels of testosterone on average, but personality-wise they were described as cerebrotonic or intellectual, inclined to desire isolation, solitude, and concealment, and being tense, anxious, restrained in posture and movement, introverted, and secretive. Mind you that in the modern day, we don't really use the personality aspect of somatotypes as Sheldon once proposed in the beginning. Put very simply, ectomorphs are skinny, tall, and lanky. Human ethnic groups that fit this soma are East Africans, and its athletic use can be seen in their prowess in long-distance running, with Kenyans and Ethiopians dominating in various events. According to Carter and Uckler in 2009, the typical somatotype of high-level male long-distance runners, 10,000 meters and marathon runners, have been estimated to be 1.5 to 4 to 3.5. So if you remember that scaling system of 117 or 717, these guys are 1.5, 4, and 3.5. This just means that these runners are either ectomesomorphs or equally ectomorphic and mesomorphic, so equal parts of both, and clearly they have very low endomorphy and they're much lower in mesomorphy than are sprinters. As such, the reason for the extent that long distance running is dominated by East Africans is not their body build in itself, but their modal combination of ectomorphy and mesomorphy, combined with greater dispositions of short or slow twitch muscle fibers and a larger lung capacity, which reflects an adaptation to a highland environment as proposed by Entine in the 2000s. Mesomorphs are characterized as hard, rugged, triangular, athletically built with well-developed muscles, thick skin, and good posture, described as somatotonic or inclined towards physical adventure and risk-taking, and being quite vigorous, courageous, assertive, direct, and dominant. They're best adapted to most sports, being the most naturally athletic and muscular, but they have a particular advantages in sports such as sprinting, football, and tennis, where explosive power gives somebody a particular advantage. This can be best seen in sprinters, which is a sport that's often dominated by people of West African descent, particularly if they hail from the West Indies, such as Jamaica. The typical somatotype of a specialist international level male sprinter has been estimated to be 1.5 to 5.5 to 3.0 by Carter and Uckler in 2009. In other words, they're extremely high in mesomorphy, even if they are ectomesomorphs overall. Last but not least, endomorphs are characterized as being round, usually shorter and softer with underdeveloped muscles and having difficulty losing weight. Their temperament has been described as viscerotonic, which is a pattern of temperament that is marked by predominance of social or over-intellectual or physical factors and exhibits conviviality, tolerance, complacency, and a love of food. They are also described as having slow reactions and being disposed to complacency. These researchers are giving endomorphs a very scathing review, if I do say so myself. They tend to also have wider hips with shorter limbs, a wider trunk, more body fat, and can gain muscular strength easier than other somas. Thus, endos being shorter than ectos and mesos have a lower center of gravity along with shorter arms. Pure strength competitions are perfect for this type of somatotype, such as the strongman competitions and the powerlifting competitions. Carter and Uckland 2009 estimate that modal somatotype for the strongest weightlifters able to lift over 100 kilos or more is 5.0 to 9.0 to 0.5. This means that they are extremely high in mesomorphy, but also extremely high in endomorphy, which would predict the vital characteristics of upper body strength and balance. In this sense, they have a similar somatotype to high-level heavyweight wrestlers, and obviously their measures of ectomorphy are going to be clearly minimal. In the World's Strongest Man competition, since 1992, 14 of the 30 winners have been from Eastern Europe, which are generally more endomorphic than those from Northwest Europe, Finland, Lithuania, Ukraine, and Poland, where the similarly endomorphic Scandinavians also have a disproportionately strong representation, being mainly from Iceland, in these strongman competitions. Somatotypes are kind of like choosing your character in a role-playing game, and each character has a certain racial bonus. Somatotypes are very similar to that. Endomorphs are short and stocky, but they're also very strong. Ectomorphs are tall and lanky, but they can run forever. And mesomorphs are quite muscular and have a mix of both characteristics. Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas are the best examples of somatotypes, and it's honestly so fitting now that I think about it. There are several ways to determine the validity of this somatotyping concept, even though it may seem very outdated. Plenty of studies have been performed using relatively new techniques to test this, after which we can think about how we can refine or improve our taxonomies. One technique are twin studies, which are used to determine the heritability of somatotypes. Twin studies are the most common way to disentangle the relative contributions of genetic variation and environmental influence, nature versus nurture. They work by quantifying correlations between certain traits in identical or monozygotic and non-identical dizygotic twins, who share 100% and 50% of additive genetic effects. The difference between the correlations of dizygotic twins compared to monozygotic twins reflects the importance of both environmental and genetic traits. One such study was performed by Peters et al., who explored the heritability of the somatotype. That is, how important is genetics in determining which somatotype you end up with compared to the environment that you're raised in, while taking into account the covariations between three components as well as possible sex and age effects, as shared environmental factors are not always able to be controlled for. In other words, one can separate identical twins at birth, but put them in similar environments where they develop similar habits, then it's logical to think that genetics has something to do with this. Heritability estimates from 10 to 18 years of age range from 0.21 to 0.88, 0.46 to 0.76, and 0.16 to 0.73 for endomorphy, mesomorphy, and ectomorphy respectively in boys. In girls, heritability ranges from 0.76 to 0.89, 0.36 to 0.57, and 0.57 to 0.76 for the same respective components, showing that there is an effect of your somatotype being inherited from your parents. Sex differences are significant from 14 years onwards, so there's a divergence from men and women from 14 years onwards in terms of somatotyping, which does make a lot of sense because around 14 years of age is when boys and girls really start to differ in terms of their changes during puberty. It's quite interesting, with the exception of endomorphic components in the 10, 11, 16, and 18-year-old males, and ectomorphy in 11-year-old males, all of the variables are normally distributed, which suggests that somatotyping exists on a continuum, much like height, with very few at the bottom and very few at the top, and most of us congregating around the middle with some combination of all three somatotypes. However, averages don't make for world champions, and so most world-class athletes are at the extreme end of their spectrum for their respective somatotype. For instance, strongmen are highly endomorphic, long-distance runners are highly ectomorphic, Ian Thorpe is highly mesomorphic. The best of the best are very specialized in their somatotypes. Somatotyping does have some use in the scientific community, especially in sports, which is where its validity is most important. When we look at playing positions within an association, such as football or soccer, the successful goalkeeper, in addition to being fast and powerful, must be relatively flexible in order to make difficult saves. In other words, he would benefit from being slightly endomorphic. A number of studies have shown that goalkeepers have the most endomorphic somatotype of all the players on the pitch, from Salgado et al. 2009, and equally Rock et al. 2014 found that midfielders, even when accounting for the margin of error, tended to be the least mesomorphic and the highest in ectomorphy, a finding that was also noted by Hazir 2010. We might also expect differences according to playing level. Hazir's study assessed the physical characteristics of soccer players according to playing level and position from the Turkish Super League, which is the equivalent of the English Premier League, and the Turkish First League, which is the equivalent of the English Championship, and the Super League players were much more mesomorphic, less endomorphic, and less ectomorphic than First League players. Except for the goalkeepers, there were significant differences in the paired averages between the whole somatotype averages of the Super League and the First League according to playing position. These results demonstrate that both physical characteristics and the somatotype of the players were significantly different between playing level and position, largely aligning with what we expect from the stereotype of each playing position. Although the somatotype of soccer players in both levels was more dominated by the mesomorph category, players at the higher playing level, so first division versus second division, were more mesomorphic and less endomorphic and ectomorphic than players at the lower levels at all playing positions, which is what you would expect. Why do these variations in somatotypes even exist? These anatomical differences between individuals and groups have been argued to be due to climatic and other ecological adaptations. The somatotypic differences between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens mirror the somatotypical differences between ethnic groups who live in cold climates and those who live in warmer environments, for example. Since Neanderthals were cold adapted, they were shorter, had wider pelves, and could thus generate more power than the heat adapted Homo sapiens, who had longer limbs, narrower pelvises to better dissipate heat, and this was proven by Weaver and Hubble in 2009 and Gruss and Schmidt 2016, who found fossil evidence to support this argument. In the case of East Africans, for example, there is much evidence to suggest that their ability to run long distances is caused by their ectomorphic body type, which evolved in hot mountainous areas to dissipate heat and oxidize muscles quickly. 75% of Kenyan running champions are from the Kalenjin tribe, which is in the Rift Valley at 2,400 meters above sea level, and champions in long distance running also tend to hail from mountainous parts of southern Africa, such as Botswana. A study by Saltin et al. 1995 showed when compared to 12 Swedes, a Kenyan sample of 13 men was particularly adapted to long distance running. More than half of their training occurred at 90% of their maximum capacity compared to the Swedish average of 15, meaning that these Kenyan men were training harder for longer during their training sessions alone than what most of the Swedes were doing in their actual running sessions. Along with more ectomorphic body types, which as mentioned allows them to dissipate heat more easily, the muscle fibers of the Kenyans were found to be smaller, which aids in oxidation, and this showed far less lactic acid buildup after exercise. They also had more enzymes, allowing them to burn fat, and their glycogen reserves were not burned as quickly. So are body types real? Well, yes, in a sense they are, but with every type of scientific taxonomical construct, any type of way we try to organize people or rocks or planets or anything, there will always be arguments on what goes where. Instead, I think we should be focused more on refining these categorizations and how applicable they actually are in science. If you enjoyed the video for this week, like, comment, and subscribe. If you'd like to learn more about what somatotype you have or learn more about your face or your body and how you can improve the way you look, then I recommend you go and order a Coob's aesthetics report over at our website. You get 24 pages of a very detailed assessment. We look at your face, your pictures, and our medical team and our aesthetics team will evaluate it, give you feedback on whether or not you should get it corrected or your surgical options, your non-surgical options. Go check it out. And I also recommend you go check out our TikTok where we have a lot of TikTok specific beauty culture topics.